My name is Ananya. This is a sorrowful story of my life that will bring tears to your eyes. I was a special maid in a bungalow, working for my mistress. I was 32 years old and had 3 children, 2 sons and a daughter. My mistress, in whose home I had been working for the past 7 years, had no children, even though she had been married for 8 years. During these 8 years, she had sought treatment from many doctors and visited numerous spiritual healers, but she still hadn't conceived. Perhaps having children wasn't in her destiny. My mistress was very kind to me. She and my master had a love marriage. A year after their wedding, she hired me, and I proved to be her most trusted maid. She would share everything good or bad with me. My master also loved children. He would say that no matter what, he wanted a child. There was a lot of love between him and my mistress, but because they didn't have children, he started becoming distant from her. He said that he wanted his own bloodline to continue. My master believed that if they didn't have a child, his family line would end. My master was adamant about having his own bloodline. My mistress tried everything possible but couldn't get pregnant. She even resorted to black magic, but it was all in vain. My master had made up his mind to marry another woman. My mistress loved her husband very much, and didn't want him to bring another woman into their home. I had always helped her a lot. Wherever she went, she would take me along. But this time, my master had firmly decided to marry another woman. My mistress was very troubled. I tried to console her, but her pain was too deep. She told me that she couldn't bear the thought of her husband having a second wife. One day, when she was extremely distressed, she suddenly asked me, "Ananya, can you help me?" I replied, "Yes, ma'am. I'm always ready to help you. You don't even need to ask. Just tell me what you need." She said, "I'm about to ask you for help with something that you might never agree to." Her words left me shocked. I said, "Ma'am, I'll help you in any way I can. Just tell me what needs to be done." Looking into my eyes, she said, "What I'm going to ask of you now will be very difficult for you to hear and even harder to do." I said, "Ma'am, please tell me. I won't refuse to help you." When she told me what she wanted, I felt the ground beneath my feet slip away. I was shocked for a moment. My mistress saw the expression on my face and understood that I was confused. She then said, "I knew you wouldn't help me." It was indeed a very difficult task, and no woman would easily agree to it. I told my mistress, "Ma'am, how can this be possible? How can I do such a big thing? This must be kept a secret, and it will bring more harm to you than to me. I'm willing to help you, but I was really struggling with the idea." My mistress said, "If you help me, I'll give you 5 million rupees. The mention of 5 million rupees left me stunned. I had never seen so much money in my life. The thought of 5 million rupees swirled in my mind because I was very poor. I had married a poor farmer. My husband lived in our village with our children while I worked in the city at my mistress's house. Every month I sent money to my husband. Since I started working here, my husband had quit his job and taken out loans worth millions. We had about 500,000 rupees in debt. These 5 million rupees could change our lives. The amount was huge and the task seemed simple. But I was worried about whether my husband would allow me to do it. I was almost certain that when he heard about the 5 million rupees, he would agree right away. With this in mind, I agreed to help my mistress. I said, "I'm ready to help you, but you'll also need to get your husband on board for this. If anyone finds out, it could damage your reputation. The biggest issue is whether your husband will agree to this." My mistress said, "If my husband is ready for a second marriage, he'll easily agree to this as well." I'm saying this with a heavy heart. I said, "Ma'am, you should talk to your husband first. Only then should we proceed with this plan. It's a very big and risky task." My mistress replied, "I know this isn't a small matter. I've made this decision with great difficulty, and now I won't back down. You just need to be ready to help me." My mistress said she could not tolerate having a co-wife for the rest of her life but could endure one night of hardship. I also steeled myself. First, I needed to get my husband's permission. Then I would proceed with the task. I called my husband, and my mistress waited for her husband to come home. Our plan was for me to have a child with my mistress's husband. My mistress said she couldn't bear the thought of sharing her husband with another woman for life, but she could tolerate him being with someone else for one night just to have a child. My mistress said, You'll go to my room in my place and be with my husband. Once you're pregnant and have the child, you'll give the baby to us. In return, I'll give you 5 million rupees. I had no problem with this because I already had 3 children. God had blessed me with both sons and a daughter. My mistress also said that after the child was born, I would have to return to my village and could no longer work for them. This made me sad. I asked, "Then where will I go to work and how will my family survive?" She said, "After receiving 5 million rupees, you won't need to work anymore. But if you still face difficulties, you have my number. You can call me. I'll always be grateful to you and will continue to help you." Hearing this, I felt happy. I called my husband and told him everything. At first, he was angry, but greed got the better of him and he agreed. When my mistress informed me that her husband was also ready, we started executing our plan. That night, my mistress sent me to her husband's room. I saw tears in her eyes for the first time. She was suffering as a fish does without water. Sometimes a woman becomes so helpless that she has to do things she never wanted to do. That night, I saw my mistress utterly broken and desperate. She hugged me and said, "Don't disappoint me. I hope the plan I'm sending you for succeeds, and that my husband is blessed with a child so that this void in our lives is filled and my husband doesn't leave me." I went into the gardener's room, and the mistress took sleeping pills and went to sleep in her room. That night must have been like a bed of thorns for her. Things went just as we had planned. We didn't have to wait long before I started feeling unwell. The mistress took me to the city's best doctor. The doctor gave us good news: I was pregnant. The mistress and the master were overjoyed, especially the master, who couldn't contain his happiness. God didn't make us wait too long. I couldn't stop thinking about the 5 million rupees, and the master and mistress were also thrilled. The master informed all his relatives that the mistress was pregnant so that no one would know the child would be born from my womb, not hers. The master's relatives were also very happy because they didn't want him to marry again. He had only been considering it out of necessity. If the master had truly wanted to marry again, he could have done so many years ago. Usually, people start planning a second marriage within 2 or 3 years if they can't have a child. But the master had waited all this time, despite being wealthy and desirable to many women. Finally, he had decided to go through with it due to pressure from society and relatives. Now, his long-held wish was about to come true. Seeing the master's happiness, I started to feel anxious for a moment. At first, I thought everything would go smoothly, but as days passed, my anxiety grew. I was distressed, while the master and mistress were dreaming of their baby's arrival. They were taking great care of me. I felt good living in their house and serving them for so many years. But now, God had turned the tables, and they were serving me as if I were the mistress of the house, and they were my servants. But a new problem arose. When the mistress's relatives learned that she was pregnant, many came to visit, asking all sorts of questions. The mistress didn't know how to answer some of them, and she became confused. The master, worried about this, suggested that staying in the bungalow wasn't a good idea. People were constantly coming and going, and no one was convinced that the mistress was truly pregnant. The master feared that people might start suspecting something was wrong. The constant stream of guests was causing trouble for both the mistress and me. The mistress needed rest, and I had to do all the work. So, I suggested to the mistress that we move to the resort in another city that belonged to the master. We could spend time there peacefully, and the master could tell his relatives that the mistress was staying at her parents' house. This way, no one would come to the resort, and we could spend time there easily. The master liked my suggestion and moved both of us to the resort. There was no one at the resort except for a guard and a maid who took care of us. In the bungalow, when guests arrived, I had to work so that no one would suspect anything. But at the resort, the master had provided everything we needed. Once we arrived, we felt very peaceful, and the mistress took great care of me. God works in mysterious ways. Until recently, I believed I wouldn't be affected, but now I was longing for my child. The mistress was kind and compassionate. I often wondered why such a good person had been dealt such a difficult hand. Is it true that good things don't happen to good people? Time passed, and strange thoughts began to fill my mind. Weeks turned into months, and my baby started kicking inside me. The first time I felt it move, I experienced a strange sensation. One night, I suddenly woke up and sat up in bed. I placed my hand on my stomach and in the darkness, felt something unusual. It was as if my child was calling out to me saying, "Mother, I am your child. Don't give me away. I am yours. Keep me with you." I started having such dreams every night. I stayed awake all night, and the lack of sleep made me feel weak. My heart gradually began to change because every night this kept happening. It wasn't just my heart that was changing but my intentions too. The 5 million rupees now seemed meaningless and worthless. I started to feel that after having 3 children I wouldn't want more. Money was what mattered to me, not children. But now I realized how wrong I was. Whether it's your first child or your last, your own child is always yours. The mistress sensed my distress. One day, I overheard a conversation between the master and mistress. The mistress was telling the master, "I hope Ananya doesn't change her mind at the last minute." The master replied, "That won't happen. She won't change her mind because she already has children. She needs money, not more kids." The mistress would often ask me why I was so quiet. The master visited the resort every week, bringing me plenty of fruits, juice, and everything I needed. I was also receiving regular treatment from my doctor every month. Then the day arrived when the doctor gave me my delivery date. The mistress immediately informed the master, who was overjoyed. He gave the mistress a large sum of money for my care, and told her to make sure nothing was lacking. Meanwhile, my heart kept aching for my child. It was night, and the mistress told me that we would go to the hospital in the morning because only one night was left before the baby would be born. The doctor had given the delivery date, and I was scheduled for surgery. Hearing this, I began to feel scared. I thought to myself that I couldn't give my child to anyone else. This was my child. I couldn't give it away for 5 million rupees. Even though the child's father was the master, I was the one who would give birth. A mother's love is stronger than a father's because she carries the child in her womb for 9 months. How could I give my child to someone else after carrying it for 9 months? I decided then and there that this child was mine. I wouldn't give it away for 500 million rupees. My intentions and my resolve had changed. I noticed that the mistress had gone to her room to sleep. I quickly packed my belongings and quietly left. My delivery date was near, so I was also in pain. I caught a bus that night and started my journey. I felt that I could no longer bear it. I had given birth to my 3 children naturally, so I was afraid of surgery. I thought, I want my child and I won't give it to anyone else. After about 6 hours of travel, I reached my village. I didn't go home because my husband was expecting the 5 million rupees. If I went to him, he would take me back to the mistress and get the money. My husband was very greedy. He had allowed me to stay with someone else because of the money. I went to Sharda, the midwife near the village. She had delivered my other children as well. I knocked on the door. It was 8 a.m. a summer morning. Sharda opened the door and was surprised to see me. She said, "You didn't come early this time." I replied, "Maybe this is God's will." I told her I was in pain and needed to deliver the baby as soon as possible. I was afraid that the owner's men might come and take my baby away. Sharda took me inside and helped me deliver the baby. An hour later, my child was born. I was overjoyed. I decided to take my baby far away so no one could find us. I didn't want the owner and his wife to find out that I had run away. I moved to a distant village with my baby and started working there. But I was punished for what I did. I got cancer, and the villagers admitted me to the hospital. There I found out I didn't have much time left. I started writing my life story so that no one else would repeat my mistakes. My son turned 15 and read my diary. He learned the truth about me and began asking questions. When he showed me the diary, I was shocked. My health began to deteriorate, but my son did everything he could to save my life. In that diary, I had written the address of the owner's bungalow in the city. My son left me with my aunt in the village and went to see the owner and his wife, taking my diary with him. I tried to stop him, but he wouldn't listen. He went alone and revealed the entire truth to the owner and his wife. They were furious at first, thinking he was lying. But when they looked closely at his face, they were shocked. The owner had a small scar on his cheek, and the same scar was on my son's cheek. This made it clear that this boy was indeed the owner's son. His mannerisms were also just like the owner's. Now the owner and his wife were convinced that he was their child. Despite their anger, they were willing to help him. The boy asked them, "Please save my mother's life. She needs treatment in the city or she will die." The owner and his wife still hadn't had a child, and after I ran away, they had given up on the idea of having one, believing that maybe God didn't want them to have a child. When the owner and his wife came to see me with the boy, seeing me in such a sick state brought back old memories for them. They forgave me but expressed their disappointment, saying that I hadn't treated them fairly. They told me, "When you ran away, we told people that our baby was born in the hospital but was stolen from there and never found. We had no idea that 15 years later, we would see our son like this." I folded my hands and apologized to them. They forgave me and took me to the city for treatment at a good hospital. God had given me a new life. My mistake was huge and death would have been a lesser punishment, but because of my son's prayers and efforts, I was saved. My other children also found out where I had been hiding for the past 15 years. My husband had died in an accident 10 years ago. My children had tried very hard to find me. I had hurt my 3 children by leaving them. They had all grown up now, and the owner's son was 15 years old. I handed the owner and his wife their son, and perhaps this was my way of atoning for my mistake. This is how I could correct my wrongs. I could no longer do any harm to this couple, as it was because of them that my life was saved. I told my son, "I will visit you, but your real father is the owner." I returned to the village to be with my children and gave the owner and his wife their son back. Now everyone is happy in their lives. I am happy living with my children, and the owner and his wife are happy with their son. Even after all these years, they kept their promise and gave me 5 million rupees when I handed their son back to them. I didn't need the money, but they insisted, saying, "Now that your husband is no longer with you, keep this money. It will help you." I felt regret for the wrong I had done to such a good couple, but I still miss my youngest son. Whenever I miss him, I go to visit him. The owner and his wife told people that this is the same son who was stolen from the hospital, and that they found him after 15 years. My son accepted the owner and his wife as his parents and is now very happy living with them in their home. Friends, I hope you liked our story. If you did, please like the video. If you're new to the channel, subscribe and press the notification bell, so you'll be the first to get the next update.